Over the Hydra base in Sokovia. Wow, I kind of like this castle, it's a pity to let those idiots of Hydra live there. The rear cabin door of the Quinjet fighter was opened, looking at the castle standing on the mountainside. Tony Stark turned his head to Su-Che and said with a smile, "Dude, what do you think of this castle? If I go back, it should be pretty good to build my seaside villa into a castle, right? Are you sure?" When they came to the door of the rear cabin, it seemed that the huge airflow had no effect on Su-Che. The atomized water flow on the fingertips compresses and condenses the black material metal hydrogen, which is constantly glowing with a silvery light in the sun. Turning his head to look at Tony Stark, Su-Che said, "Are you sure people would like to live in this kind of castle, just like Dracula's resurrection?" Forget it. Thinking of Pepper, Wani Stark instantly dispelled the idea. "I am still waiting for this matter to be over, and I will go back to confess my love to Peebo. So don't piss off Peebo just yet." Thinking of this, Tony opened his arms and smiled at everyone. "Okay guys, the first battle of our team has arrived, so I'll take a step ahead. I have to let these stupid guys experience the love from their Tony daddy." After speaking, Tony Stark jumped off the plane directly. Watching Tony jump off the Quinjet in his armor, Steve came over with a shield in one hand and a hammer in one hand and said to Su-Che, "If possible, I really hope Tony can take back what he just said. After all, no one wants to be the father of this group of Hydra." Smiling at Su-Che, at the same time Steve's body began to flicker with the power of thunder, and then he jumped lightly, and the whole person jumped directly from the fighter jet. "Tony, Steve. You two stay away from the castle first, I will give this group of guys a big gift first." Said something to Steve and Tony, who jumped down through the headset. Then Su-Che turned his head to Natasha Romanoff and Kaylin Tay Barton, who were driving the Quinjet fighter, and said, "I'll go there first, see you after the matter is over." Su. Looking at Su-Che, who was rustling his silver and white cloak. Natasha Romanoff, who was driving the Quinjet fighter jet, immediately said, "The outside is left to you, the louder the noise, the better." "No problem, I like big scenes," he nodded at the two of them. Then Su-Che jumped off the plane. Countless drops of black metal hydrogen condensate beads under his fingertips flew towards the castle at top speed like cannonballs. Boom. Boom. Accompanied by the attack of the metal hydrogen condensation beads on the castle, the original complete castle exploded violently in the next second. Almost in the blink of an eye, the entire ancient castle entrenched on the mountainside was directly enveloped by explosions and flames soaring into the sky. A strong wave rose from the ground, destroying almost all the trees around the castle and blowing them away in an instant. And the outer city of the ancient castle is even more dilapidated, a mess. It's really a big scene. On the Quinjet fighter jet, I watched the outer city of the castle fall into a violent explosion and sea of flames for a moment. Kaylin Tay Barton, who was sitting in the co-pilot, said in amazement, "Natasha Romanoff, didn't you say that sus ability is water? I thought Su was going to flood the Hydra base." Listening to Barton's words, Natasha Romanoff controlled the Quinjet fighter to find a stable place to land. While unbuttoning the seatbelt, he said, "This is still his effort. If Su really lets go and fights, then the entire Sokovia will be razed to the ground, or will be flooded and become ruins." As she said that, Natasha Romanoff picked up her weapon and said, "Let's go, we're about to make an appearance. The more noise they make outside, the more they can mobilize those Hydra soldiers. We can also take this opportunity to break in and search for some Hydra secrets." Jumping from the plane, Barton drew the arrow and readied it. Then he ran to the base with Natasha Romanoff. "I'm quite envious that they can fly, as if we are the only ones in the whole team who can't fly." Listening to Barton's complaints, Natasha Romanoff ran with a weapon in hand, looking up at the sky. At this moment, Steve was flying in the sky with the hammer, and he was constantly using the hammer to summon thunder, and was attacking the alarmed Hydra soldiers. "If I wanted to, then maybe I'd fly now too." Just saying something casually, ignoring Barton's surprised expression, Natasha Romanoff rushed to the castle with Barton along the path. Battlefield outside. "Cool man. What did you do with that exploding thing?" "Control the armor and use the shoulder missiles to cause bursts of explosions against the swarming Hydra soldiers." Tony Stark asked Su-Che curiously. "Ask Jarvis, it should be able to analyze it." At the edge of the forest, staring at the dense hail of bullets, Countless ice needles shot up into the sky. Su Che's eyes were cold, and the ice needles harvested the lives of Hydra soldiers like Death God's sickle. Take out dozens of Hydra soldiers effortlessly. Looking at the heavily armed Hydra soldiers coming from the castle, Su Che soared into the air. The cold mist gathered in the palms of his hands, and then turned into shells and rushed directly towards the crowd. The howling cold wind seemed extremely shrill around the surroundings, like a ghost sobbing. Wherever Su Che went, the ice condensed, and countless sharp ice chains gleaming with cold light stretched from Su Che's side at a very fast speed after he landed. The huge ice formation that was as sharp as vibranium blades spread out in all directions with Su Che as the center. In the blink of an eye, the Hydra soldiers who surrounded Su Che were trapped by the sharp ice chains. Under the sun, the cold ice chain array exudes a holy light, as charming as a glacier fairyland on Earth. But all the ice chains pierced through the corpses of Hydra soldiers. The bursts of viscous flowing blood are bright in color, forming a very bright color contrast with the ice chains exuding holy light. Its contrasting effect seems to penetrate the depths of the soul. Oh shit. Seeing this scene, Tony Stark in the air widened his eyes and couldn't help but swear. The shattered corpses with obviously severed limbs and arms were chained in ice and threaded into strings, just like the scene of Shura in Hell. But the bright and dark red blood reflected under the ice locks exuding holy light is very beautiful. The scene formed by the blending of the two is like a beautiful scroll of paintings. Eerie yet poignant, creepy and haunting. Hey Tony, stop swearing. He knocked a Hydra soldier into the air with a shield, and looked at the Hydra team rushing towards him while holding the weapon and firing bullets at himself. Steve raised his hammer to summon lightning, and directly blasted the enemies in front of him. After hearing Tony curse subconsciously in the headset, Steve withdrew the shield and said something while pressing the headset. Kong man Steve, you didn't see what Su made, those hundreds of Hydra soldiers. Forget it. I can't say it, I don't even know how to describe it now. Looking at the place where the small missiles on the shoulders of his battle armor exploded, the corpses of many Hydra soldiers were in a mess. This horrible scene was in sharp contrast to Su Che's weird and beautiful battlefield. This is simply heaven and earth. This makes Tony Stark a little helpless. Even the cruel battlefield can be turned into an art exhibition hall? The number of Hydra soldiers defeated by myself is not as many as others, and the explosion scene caused by just entering the field is incomparable. How can I say this myself? What else can this say? Depend on. What the hell happened? Watch Iron Man Tony Stark flying in the sky through the monitor. Watch Steve Rogers with a shield in one hand and a Mjolnir in the other. Looking at the Silver Moon Knight who rushed into the crowd and destroyed the Hydra soldiers because of one combination. Baron Strucker angrily knocked on the table to ask his subordinates. Even I felt the violent explosion in the outer city of the castle just now. I thought it was an accident in an experiment by the scientific research team. But hearing the sound of fighting and screams coming from outside, Baron Strucker quickly ran to the monitoring room. Only then did I see this chilling scene through the monitor screen. Damn it. Why did Iron Man, Silver Moon Knight, and that damn Captain America Steve Rogers attack his Hydra base together? When was his Hydra base exposed, and why did the three of them know about it? Moreover, you must know that all the soldiers under your command are well-trained Hydra soldiers. It is a Hydra soldier who holds a Hydra single-person black technology weapon that even ordinary troops cannot defeat. Is the Hydra soldiers who are so powerful that they can easily control the entire Sokovia with just a few thousand people. But in front of these three guys, he was slaughtered like a cub. Even those weapons that are powerful enough to destroy a strong fortress are useless in front of these three people. Squeeze out. Everyone in technology are all pushed out. Watching groups of Hydra soldiers being massacred, Baron Strucker yelled at his assistant angrily. Yes, sir. Hearing what Baron Strucker said, the assistant ran out quickly. Wait until only Baron Strucker and Cetrical are left in the room. Baron Strucker, who was originally furious and had an extremely ferocious expression, regained his composure in an instant. While holding the phone and starting to dial, he said to Citrical, Citrical, go to the scientific research team and destroy all the data that can be destroyed. It's just ruined like that. Listening to Baron Strucker's plain order, Citricker, who is in charge of leading the scientific research department, felt a little bit reluctant. Your Excellency Baron, that is our decades of research results and painstaking efforts. If not, dial the most secret number hidden in the phone. Baron Strucker spread his hands and said, "That's the Silver Moon Knight, and besides him is an Iron Man, Tony Stark. Haven't you seen the news?" It was reported in the news that when Tony Stark's suit of battle armor fought against the Iron King, even missiles couldn't blow it up. Not to mention, there is also an enhanced version. I don't know where to get a hammer, and Steve Rogers who can summon lightning. With these people under our hands, how can we fight them? Seeing Baron Strucker with a calm face, Citricker opened his mouth, but for a moment he didn't know what to say. Obviously at the last second you ordered all the soldiers to rush out, and all the high-tech weapons were aimed at them. An attitude of wishing to resolutely fight them desperately. But ready to give up in the next second? You surrendered too quickly. Are you really going to stop holding on? Don't look at me like that, I'm ready to surrender anyway. Seeing Dr. Strucker looking at him with that kind of eyes, Baron Strucker spread his hands. The reason why all the Hydra soldiers are allowed to attack is to delay a little time. The research team's data can be damaged as much as possible. Dr. Citrical, don't think about fighting back. Didn't we study the Silver Moon Knight's ability based on the news reports? Bullets and missiles don't pose any threat to him. It feels like the body of Superman in the comics. Plus his abilities, Doctor, people have to face the reality. We are no match for these three people at all. After speaking, looking at the phone that couldn't get through at all, Strack casually threw it on the ground, and then crushed it with his foot. Damn it, I knew that stupid Alexander Pierce was unreliable. He doesn't even know that Silver Moon Knight teamed up with Iron Man and Captain Magnesium to attack our base. He couldn't even get through the phone at the critical moment. You said, why does he command the entire elders? Listening to Baron Strucker's words, Citricker was silent for a while. Yes, Alexander Pierce is an idiot who doesn't even know the news. But you're not going there either. Surrender when you see someone knocking on your door. Damn it. How do you face the Great Red Skull, Lord John Schmidt? Glancing at the monitoring screen, there are 3 destructive guys at the moment. Especially seeing that the Silver Moon Knight rushed to the heavy artillery in the bunker, and flew out together with the heavy artillery. Citrical turned around and ran towards the scientific research base. Can't beat it at all. Destroy some if you can. Baron Strucker is ready to surrender without moral integrity. What's the use of being a researcher by yourself? Just turned a corner and ran out not far. I saw an arrow nailed directly to the wall not far away. Several red lights on the arrow's arrow flickered slightly. In the next second, a violent explosion struck instantly. Several Hydra soldiers who were guarding there were blown away by the explosion before they could react. That guy with his arms exposed, his quiver on his back and a bow and arrow, actually knows how to take advantage of the chaos. Tisk. As expected of Hawkeye from S.H.I.E.L.D., he really didn't leave a single one alive. Have to. People who have nothing to say, Hawkeye sneaked in. Baron Strucker prepares to surrender, and Hawkeye sneaks in. I still care about destroying data. Run. Just turning around to prepare to run away, the next second a black muzzle of a gun directly hit Citrical's head. Do you know me? Looking at the scientific researcher wearing a white coat in front of him, Natasha Romanoff asked with a gun to his head. Recognize. Recognize. Being held on the head by the muzzle of a gun, Dr. Citrical nodded repeatedly. S.H.I.E.L.D. Natasha Romanoff agent, nicknamed Black Widow. Just know me, don't move around, I'll kill you if you move. Stretching out her hand to grab Dr. Citrical's collar, Natasha Romanoff pushed him forward and said, take me to your secret database. If you dare to take a detour, bullets don't have eyes. Okay. Don't shoot, be careful. Facing the threat of Natasha Romanoff, Dr. Citricker doesn't have the backbone of Baron Strucker just now. Take Natasha Romanoff behind you, and walk towards the database. Over the years, Natasha Romanoff has seen more of her enemies. But this is the first time Natasha Romanoff has seen such a spineless enemy. It's not that the people in Hydra are not afraid of death, or that after being caught, they would rather bite through the cyanide inlaid on their gums. And definitely don't want to be captured alive? But this guy in front of me. Listening to him rambling along the way, in order to survive, he kept talking about what Hydra weapons are, and where are the secret materials hidden. Even the weapons and research directions that scientific researchers have studied for decades, they can't wait to say it all at once. If it weren't for Natasha Romanoff to be able to tell, This guy didn't want to mislead himself, but was really afraid of death. Then Natasha Romanoff will think that this guy is lying to himself for delaying the rescue. Catch your tongue. Look at this guy who keeps talking to Natasha Romanoff about the various research rooms, archives, and hidden bases of the Hydra base. After Hawkeye finished dealing with the guards over there, he came over and asked Natasha Romanoff in surprise. It went so well it was incredible. Shrugging his shoulders at Kaylin Tay, Natasha Romanoff didn't know how to explain it for a while. The mission was completed smoothly, because there is a coward in Hydra who is afraid of death. Although this is true, I always feel that even Nick Fury won't believe it if I say it. Outside. What a big tank. Watching several giant tanks slowly drive out from the castle grounds. Tony Stark's eyes lit up immediately. Steve, is this the giant tank that my father once said you destroyed with the Roaring Commando? My good fellow, nearly 70 years have passed. I never thought they would still use this kind of antique. Dodge a giant tank and fly towards yourself. Tony Stark hit the huge monster-like tank with the palm energy cannon, and asked Steve through the headset. Tony, I always feel like you're comparing me to these tanks. Flew into the air with a hammer, and then summoned several thunderbolts to directly attack these giant tanks. Steve smiled helplessly. Huh? It was actually heard? Listen to Steve's answer. Tony Stark, who was flying in the air, made a funny sound. Wow, I thought you couldn't understand the language of the new era W. Don't you have a little notebook with many omissions? These words should not be written in that book. Listening to Tony's teasing, Steve, helplessly, took the hammer and landed directly on top of the giant tank from the air. Picking up the shield and smashing it hard, the lock on the top of the tank was cut open, and then he reached out and grabbed the driver's collar and threw it out. It's been nearly 70 years, why haven't these guys learned how to be smart? 70 years ago, I destroyed their giant tanks like this. I didn't expect that they would not grow at all after 70 years. Whether Tony's words were mocking or teasing, Steve could still tell the difference. No malicious teasing, Steve naturally didn't have any. Who told me to stop Tony from swearing just now? Destroying a few giant tanks with ease, Steve watched the steady but dwindling stream of Hydra soldiers. Then he pressed the headset and said, Sue, the remaining 5-headed Snake King soldiers outside are handed over to me in tow. Go support Natasha Romanoff and Kaylin Tay. I'm afraid they're going to be in trouble. No problem. Hearing Steve's words from the headset, he grabbed a Hydra soldier by the collar and soared into the sky. Then, after throwing this guy down in midair, he flew directly towards the castle. There are no obstacles along the way. In fact, during the first wave of attack, most of the Hydra soldiers were shot. When the second wave of attack came, the remaining Hydra soldiers were replaced with Hydra high-tech weapons. But whether it is facing Su Che, the Silver Moon Knight with the iron body of Superman, or facing Tony Stark wearing a battle armor, or Steve who has a shield in one hand and Mjolnir in one hand, there is no way, not even the defense can be broken. Flying all the way to the ancient castle, after landing from the air, and casually eliminated a few Hydra soldiers guarding the gate, Su Che walked in without any effort. Silver Moon Knight, Su Che. As soon as he entered the castle, he saw that Baron Strucker got a walking stick from somewhere. Obviously his legs and feet are intact, but it seems that he can show his identity even more by living with a walking stick. Aren't you curious? You hide it very well, but I can know your real identity? While talking, Baron Strucker walked towards Su Che. It's actually very simple, as long as you can guarantee me. Boom. Before this guy could finish speaking, pretending to be noble, Yin casually knocked him out. He glanced coldly at Strack, who fell to the ground. Su Che pressed the headset and asked where Natasha Romanoff and Kaylin Tay were, and then rushed over. Are you kidding? Don't you know that the villain died because of talking too much? And I need you to tell me, how did you know my identity? If I really want to hide my identity, why should I hang out with Steve and Tony every day? Although, these two bastards took the initiative to come to the door every day. Grab a Hydra soldier at random, and ask for the location of the reference room with mind magic. Su Che went all the way to the reference room smoothly. Reference room. At this moment, Dr. Citricker was squatting on the ground with his head in his hands, and Kaylin Tay was vigilant all around with a bow and arrow. On the other hand, Natasha Romanoff is constantly copying some top-secret research results of the Hydra base in Kuvia with a USB flash drive. After seeing Su Che approaching, Natasha Romanoff turned her head and said, I am very glad that Wanda and Pietro were picked up by S.H.I.E.L.D. in advance. Why? Su, you absolutely have no idea what kind of insane experiments these bastards have made to study how common people can obtain super abilities through technology. Listening to Natasha Romanoff's words, Su Che walked to the computer and took a look. Just glanced at it, Su Che said to Natasha Romanoff, destroy it. Even if these so-called research materials are precious, but I don't want to destroy S.H.I.E.L.D. with my own hands in the future. Hearing what Su Che said, Natasha Romanoff also nodded earnestly. I will definitely destroy these data. As long as a little leaks out, I'm afraid it will cause a big disaster. What I have copied is the scientific research data of this Hydra base over the years. I am not going to bring back the part about the human body's super ability experiment. After speaking, Natasha Romanoff looked at Barton. Don't look at me. Kei Lin Tae, who was playing with arrows, saw Natasha Romanoff looking at him. Then he twisted the arrow and said with a smile, after so many years of partner, don't you know me? Listening to Barton's answer, Natasha Romanoff nodded, and then said to Su, give me 3 minutes. Su, in 3 minutes, Barton and I will evacuate here. This place is full of all the filth in the world. Please destroy it completely. I'm good at this. Nodding slightly, Su Che looked at Dr. Citricker, who was crouching on the ground with his head in his arms. Then asked Natasha Romanoff, does he use it again? Save it for pressing. Forget it, let's get rid of it. With these materials, I can go back and hand over my business. It's the super ability experiment led by this guy, thinking that if we hadn't picked up Wanda and Pietro, maybe they would have been murdered too. I feel very uncomfortable. Saying that, Natasha Romanoff raised his pistol, and without any hesitation, he used a bullet to open a hole in the head of Citrical, who was squatting on the ground and was about to beg for mercy. Natasha Romanoff, who has long regarded Wanda and Pietro as younger siblings, wouldn't want to see chops like this alive in the world. Even, Wanda and Pietro haven't suffered any damage yet. Carry the fainted Baron Strucker, Natasha Romanoff and Barton to the place where the Quinjet is parked. At this moment, Steve and Tony also took care of those Hydra soldiers. They were standing side by side as if they were talking about something. After seeing Natasha Romanoff and Barton coming over with Baron Strucker, Steve then asked, this is the leader of the Hydra base in Sokovia? That's right. Barton tossed Baron Strucker into the cockpit of the Quinjet and replied to Steve, this guy doesn't know what he wants to say to Su. But Su didn't listen to his nonsense, so he knocked him out. After Natasha Romanoff and I copied those materials, we brought him back. But it seems that although this guy ordered the Hydra soldiers to charge us, he is ready to surrender. Hearing what Barton said, Steve glanced at the unconscious Baron Strucker, and then smiled with emotion. It's really not as good as the next generation. If Red Skull John Schmidt knew what his subordinates would look like 70 years later, I don't know how he would feel. But if all the leaders of Hydra are like this, then there is nothing to worry about in the future. Just as Steve finished speaking, Tony Stark on the side said speechlessly, hey, buddy, don't think I can't hear that you're making fun of me. I just finished telling you that I used my father's future key display board to research new substances, but you just watched this fainted guy say that one generation is not as good as one generation. Kong busy. Why not stop like this? Didn't I just say that Hydra still uses giant tanks that look like antiques from 70 years ago? It's really, as expected of being the captain of the Magnesium country, you don't suffer at all. Seeing Tony's speechless expression, Steve smiled and said nothing. He likes the relaxed atmosphere after the war, which always reminds him of the past. After leading the Howling Commando to fight, and Bucky and the others gathered in the tavern for a cheerful scene. The sense of relaxation after victory is really fascinating. I never thought that after nearly 70 years, I can still experience it. As for Tony, just now I just imitated Sus' technique and responded to him. Sure enough, no loss is the nemesis in the interface. By the way, where's Su? He looked around, but did not find Su Che. Tony Stark asked Natasha Romanoff and Barton. It's full of sin. Natasha Romanoff and Barton hadn't spoken yet, but Steve was the first to laugh and said, and no one knows how much harmful dirt there is in this base, so Su should deal with the aftermath. Steve was right. Natasha Romanoff on the side put away the weapon and said to Tony, "Just the very harmful, sealed scientific research gas in those laboratories is enough to kill many people. So instead of letting this ancient castle continue to exist, it is better to let it completely disappear from this world." After the widow finished speaking, there were bursts of rumbling sounds from the direction of Tungbao not far away. Hearing this voice, everyone looked at the past along the line of sight. Suddenly there were bursts of violent explosions on the mountain that was originally intact. A strong explosion burst into the sky, and countless boulders fell from the mountain with the sound of whistling. And the monstrous flood rushes up from the top of the mountain. Its aura is like an ancient monster, sweeping down with an indomitable mudslide. Boom. The ancient castle standing halfway up the mountain was hit by boulders and floods, and it turned into ruins in an instant. In the face of the horrific natural disaster, the originally intact castle had no resistance at all, and it turned into nothingness and was submerged in boulders and mudslides. Even the original mountain seems to be more than 10 meters shorter. Tony Stark smacked his lips, and suddenly said to Steve at the side, "Steve, seeing Sus' ability, I suddenly had a very bold idea." Tony. Hearing Tony Stark's words, Steve turned his head and glanced at him. "Come on. You don't know what I'm thinking." "Yes, I really can't guess what your idea is, but I don't think it must be a good plan." "Huh. Dude, you're getting smarter." Listening to the bickering between the two, Natasha Romanoff paid attention to the direction of the rushing flood and mudslides. I have to say that Natasha Romanoff now has a new understanding of Suche's ability. Natasha Romanoff already knew that if Suche was willing to use his ability to the extreme, then it is very simple to easily destroy a city. Not to mention triggering a huge amounts of tsunami or flood, this kind of disaster that everyone can see intuitively. Simply speaking, when he was dealing with Olivia Temple, he could use the perfect water control ability to turn water into metal hydrogen. As for the step before turning water into metal hydrogen, I have checked it myself. It is a kind of warm and dense matter, which has the probability of collisions between atomic nuclei. Once the collision between atomic nuclei occurs, nuclear fusion reaction occurs. The energy released during this period is enough to easily destroy a city. Although it takes extremely harsh conditions to compress water to such a degree, Suche can all be transformed into metallic hydrogen. Then the nuclear fusion reaction is no more difficult for Suche. It really gave Natasha Romanoff a new understanding of Suche's strength. It is the monstrous floods and mudslides in front of us, which just engulfed huge boulders and fell from the top of the mountain, and then buried the ancient castle of Hydra. The unstoppable flood and rock flow, like a natural disaster, gradually stopped when it reached the foot of the mountain. If I read correctly, the floods and mudslides did not even damage even half an acre of farmland below. This perfect control is what Natasha Romanoff refreshed her most. After destroying the old castle with mountain explosions and flood boulders, Suche stepped on the mist and flew down from the sky. What else is this guy carrying? Seeing Baron Strucker thrown into the cabin, Suche smiled at Natasha Romanoff. After seeing me, this guy wants to surrender and wants to get some good treatment. This is the first time I have seen Hydra who is so greedy for life and afraid of death. Yes, it is not as good as the Hydra company on the small sea island that Sue and I went to deal with together. Tony Stark on the side also nodded and smiled. The Hydra of the company in Shanghai Island, knowing that they are dead, dared to attack me and Sue. Even the guy who was caught, resolutely bit the poison on his teeth and committed suicide. Speaking of this, Tony Stark glanced at the fainted Baron Strucker in the cabin. Look at this guy, I feel worthless for his subordinates. Okay. Don't talk so much, let's leave. Steve on the side interrupted with a smile. But Natasha Romanoff, please send me to New Mexico before that, I have to return the hammer. Although it will enhance my strength, it does not belong to me after all. Facing Steve's request, Natasha Romanoff nodded and agreed. No problem, it's just a detour. Anyway, Nick Fury shouldn't care about the fuel money of the plane. TCH, since you can pick it up, why go back? You also said that no one can take it away. I just couldn't pick it up with the power of the battle armor. While walking up to the plane, Tony Stark was talking. For the hammer that I can't even use the energy of the armor. Tony Stark is full of interest in research. In his opinion, it is something that has no owner and cannot be picked up by others. Since Steve can get it, it should belong to Steve. Only 3 USD for an hour. Looking at the strong figure in front of him, sweat is constantly flowing along the strong muscles of the upper body. But the expression is very relaxed. Thor. Jane Foster asked in disbelief. Are you sure you can only get 20 yuan if you work on the construction site for a day? I and Daisy have been staying here for more than 2 months. If it wasn't for Dr. Selvig to let him and Daisy wait for him here, then the two of them would have left this small town long ago. I went shopping today, and when I passed by the small town construction site, I saw Thor working there with a hammer. Jane Foster was taken aback by the sight. After saying hello and chatting for a while, Jane Foster found out that Thor can only earn $20 a day at this construction site. Isn't this a scam? This is to be condemned. In the past it would have been hung on a street lamp. This job is actually not bad. With one hand pinching his waist, Thor looked at Jane Foster, who had a slightly unhappy expression in front of him, and smiled. You know, I like this job, although it's very hard to hit those things with a hammer. But it reminds me of my old days in Asgard, with Mjolnir. As he said that, Thor wiped the sweat off his body casually. His expression was still relaxed, but a trace of worry flashed in his eyes. I also only recently realized that money is so important on your Earth. When I first came here, Doris took care of me and had to go to work during the day. As a result, Doris has been ill recently and is very weak. I heard from the doctor that a lot of money is needed for treatment. Having said that, Thor raised his hand and wiped his long hair, with a hint of helplessness in his tone. This job is the only way I can find money. And I can get the money with some effort. I am very fair. After all, in our Asgard, is Doris sick? Listening to Thor say his girlfriend is sick, Jane Foster asks with concern. Is he all right? Not very well. His face is very pale, his body is also very weak, and he has been taking medicine. She doesn't have medical insurance sharing or Medicaid, and doesn't she buy commercial medical insurance? Not sure, but probably not. Listening to Jane Foster say a lot of things that I don't understand. Thor spreads his hands to show that he doesn't quite know. Well, if you don't mind, can I visit her later? After all, during this time, Yin's family is all neighbors. And I've met Doris a few times. She's really a very gentle and kind person. Well, Jane Foster's house is just a few steps away from Doris' house. Call it a neighbor. Definitely, I think if you visit her, she will be very happy. Listening to Jane Foster's words, Thor nodded with a smile. I work here all day, and I'm also worried that she will be bored at home alone. By the way, Thor, you Liao. Gently nodding, Jane Foster remembered the matter of Thor's salary, and immediately said, you should know that according to the latest industry standards formulated by the guild this year, the hourly wages of construction workers are compared with last year. Watching Thor start to wonder what he was talking about again, Jane Foster directly took Thor's arm while walking towards the construction site and said, take me to your supervisor. For 3 yuan an hour, he should really be taken to hang on a street lamp. Not far away. Seeing this scene, Phil Coulson picked up the phone and dialed out. Doris, your neighbor, Ms. Jane Foster, has taken Thor to find the person in charge of the construction site. Up. It looks like she's going to claim Thor's normal hourly wages. Small town home. Listening to Phil Coulson's report on the other end of the phone, Doris turned on the speaker and played video games while holding the controller with both hands. One side said, well, she is quite a girl with a sense of justice, not bad. Phil Coulson, find a way to get Thor and Jane Foster a little more involved. This design shouldn't be too difficult for you. The time has come? Roughly the same. Seeing that the character she controlled had died on the screen, Doris picked up the phone and said, although I don't know why Nick chose the girl Jane Foster as my successor. But during this period of time, I tried to get in touch with her, and she is indeed a very nice girl. And in the past 2 months or so, Thor has been almost the same, and his mentality has improved a lot compared to when he was exiled from Asgard just now. Now, it's just a matter of giving him a big show, and I'm going back to the Eagle's Nest too. If we don't go back, those newcomers to the Eagle's Nest will think that they can join S.H.I.E.L.D. just because they are training their abilities. Hearing Doris' words, Phil Coulson smiled. If it is said that only 2 months can change a person's personality and make a person's mental growth gradually grow, then I am afraid that anyone will not believe it. However, Phil Coulson has seen with his own eyes how Doris guides the whole process in the past 2 months. Rot. Generally speaking, if it is a common person, then Doris only needs a few days, no more than half a month to change it. Even Phil Coulson knew that it took Doris only less than a week. It completes the transformation of a person from a cowardly character to a mentality with strong psychological endurance. But this Thor is quite stubborn, in Doris' words. This aspect refers to the character and mentality that he has cultivated for more than 1,500 years. As a last resort, Doris even adopted some unconventional means. Even so, it took nearly 2.5 months for Doris to slowly turn around. You know, she is the top psychiatrist in S.H.I.E.L.D. and also one of the top agents in the world. That's it. According to Diaries, the fire is still a little short, and the last bit of stimulation is needed. Didn't you see Thor, the majestic prince of Asgard, went to the construction site to swing a hammer in order to cure Doris? That's one of those good changes. There are many other similar things. Listening to what Doris said on the other end of the phone, Phil Coulson smiled and said, Doris, haven't you been so tempted for more than 2 months? As soon as the voice was finished, there was no movement on the other end of the phone. In just a short moment, Phil Coulson was unscientific, and felt a cold breath coming from the phone. Although, it is very possible that this icy breath is actually derived from his own impression of Doris. After a while, Doris' voice on the other end of the phone revealed a trace of indifference. For me, only the rookie at Eagle's Nest can make me feel relieved. In addition, tell Nick Fury that this year's Eagle's Nest training camp death rate will increase by 3% from the original basis. Walter? Hey Doris, please don't do this, you know us. Nick Fury will understand, he's doing the same thing over there. After finishing speaking, Doris immediately hung up the phone. Looking at the phone that had ended the call, Phil Coulson was silent for a moment. Now, many rookies will die again. I wish Doris would be gentler. Turning around, listening to the familiar sound of Quinjet fighter jets in the sky, Phil Coulson got into the car immediately and drove towards the temporary camp where S.H.I.E.L.D. was stationed. Maybe this time, maybe Captain Rogers, who sent the hammer back, can help me sign a collection card for myself. Hey guys, let's say we destroyed a Hydra base of horrors. After getting off the Quinjet fighter, Tony Stark looked at the crowd in his battle armor and said, you know, Hydra was a very terrifying existence in 70 years. But now, they were easily defeated by us. So, shouldn't we throw a party? Listening to Tony Stark's proposal, everyone looked at me and I looked at you, but no one spoke. For a moment, the atmosphere was a little awkward. Okay, I admit, I just had a little. Okay, in fact, the task this time is not that difficult. But it's rare for us to be together for the first time and destroy the Sokovia Hydra base. So, wouldn't it be worth a party to celebrate? After all, we'll probably do July 17th together more than once in the future. So, as the only billionaire among the few of us, I'm out of the drinking place. At worst, I'll bring out the fine wine that I have collected for more than 20 years to entertain you. Hearing what Tony Stark said, everyone nodded. Then it's settled, but to be honest, I was really embarrassed that you didn't talk just now. So in order to get this place back. Enough drinks tonight. I promise to make you all drunk to death, and then take pictures of you enough to be even more embarrassing. At that time, I will contract the next movie hall, and then invite all employees of Stark Industries to enjoy it together. While speaking mercilessly, Tony Stark controlled the armor to take off. After gesturing to everyone, Tony Stark left straight away wearing his battle armor. Watching Tony fly away wearing the armor, Steve, holding the shield, turned his head to Suche and said, Tony wants to fully integrate into us. It can be seen that he should not have any friends these years, otherwise he wouldn't. Hearing what Steve said, the suit of the Silver Moon Knight on Suche's body also gradually disappeared, and he returned to the normal clothes again. Judging from the fact that he must join when he heard that we have taken action, I agree with you. But the more you fight to the death, the more you will be able to generate feelings. Natasha Romanoff on the side watched Barton carrying the fainted Baron Strucker, and leaned over to look at Suche and Steve curiously. We're talking friendship. TCH, I don't mean anything else. Listening to Suche and Steve's unanimous explanation, Natasha Romanoff shrugged his shoulders. I thought Tony would have already joined this newly formed group. Hearing what Natasha Romanoff said, Steve said softly, it's not up to us, it's up to Tony. The reason why he followed this time was because he wanted to join this small team headed by Sue. Maybe he didn't want to see if this small team is suitable for his consideration. But judging from his behavior before he left, he should be very satisfied with this team. At least, with Su here, Sleepy has nothing to worry about. Make friends. It's not just about personality compatibility. It depends on whether the friend is worth making friends with. Steve was right. Apart from Pepper and Happy, Tony probably only had Rhodes as a friend at most. But Rhodes' identity background is destined to not allow him to stand firmly on Tony's side. What are friends? A friend is as long as it is not a principled mistake, then I will support you in whatever you do. Even if I saw you fighting with others on the street, then I will definitely rush to help you beat him without saying a word. Even if you are the one who is wrong in the end, you are the one who provoked others first. In addition to issues of principle and the bottom line, everything must be right or wrong. So what do you need friends for? Find a judge. Steve didn't say a word. That is, Sue and Tony are friends, and I and Sue are also friends. But Tony and Natasha Romanoff and Barton are not friends. Although I joined S.H.I.E.L.D., but once Sue and S.H.I.E.L.D. disagreed, then myself and Tony will definitely stand by Sus' side. Tony joined this small team that wasn't part of the Avengers alliance yet. I just want to see if everyone in this team is worthy and become a friend that I recognize like Su-Che. Well, not bad. At least for Natasha Romanoff and Barton, Tony is more recognized. Definitely, the positions of Natasha Romanoff and Barton are also doomed. There is no way Tony can trust Sue and Steve as much as they trust Sue and Steve. But that doesn't stop us from being friends. So, before leaving, Tony sent out party invitations. It's only 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Where are you two going? Why don't you come to S.H.I.E.L.D. for lunch? Glancing at the time, Natasha Romanoff smiled and extended an invitation to Sue and Steve. Forget it. Facing Natasha Romanoff's invitation, Su-Che declined with a smile. Steve on the side looked up at the weather, and then smiled at Natasha Romanoff. The sun is so sunny and the temperature is so comfortable, isn't it suitable for fishing? So you and Barton bring this guy back to S.H.I.E.L.D. Okay. Then I wish you two big men a good time this afternoon. He deliberately smiled and said something to the two of them with words full of ambiguity. Then he and Kaylin Tay Barton walked towards the direction of the Trident building. Looking at Barton, he still didn't forget to turn around and say hello to the two of them. Su-Che put his hands in his pockets and said to Steve, "Are you sure you're ready?" "Well, tomorrow." Taking a deep breath, Steve glanced at the shield in his hand and shook his head. "I haven't exhausted my aura yet, so it's not suitable for me to meet her. By the way, Sue, where is the car parked?" Hearing Steve's question, Su-Che froze for a moment. "Come on. Natasha Romanoff picked me up in a Quinjet, so I'm not driving." "Then what should we do?" "The Trident building is in Washington, and it's more than 380 kilometers away from New York. We can't run back." "Do you want to go to the airport?" "Actually, the scenery along the way north from is pretty good." "Okay. Let's rent a car. Inside S.H.I.E.L.D. After delivering the Baron Strucker to a dedicated person, Barton followed Natasha Romanoff, and while walking towards the restaurant, Barton said, "The way back, including a trip to New Mexico on the way." You looked at Sue unconsciously. "Why, Natasha Romanoff, have you fallen in love with Sue? If you're tempted, go for it boldly." "Come on. I don't like to compete with my sister for a boyfriend. My focus is on Sue and Steve." On the way back, their expressions were not so happy, at least not the kind of joy after the victory of the war. Listening to Barton's words, Natasha Romanoff said as she walked, "Besides, as a person who is destined not to belong to my own child, I'd better not harm others." At dusk. Party at Tony Stark's villa. I always feel like something is missing. Touching Su-Che with the wine glass in his hand, Tony Stark frowned and said, "What's missing?" Natasha Romanoff, who was leaning on the sofa, couldn't help laughing when she heard Tony's words. "Do you think there are some beauties missing?" "As far as I know, normally there are many models and Hollywood actresses in the parties of the talented Tony Stark." Hearing what Natasha Romanoff said, Tony blinked and didn't speak. Pepper touched Natasha Romanoff with champagne. "It's true, every time Tony holds a party, he will attract a lot of women with good figures. And then, the next morning, I have to help him clean up some humanoid consumables." After clinking wine glasses with Peepo, Natasha Romanoff took a sip of champagne. Instead, Tony Stark patted his head. I remember, it's barbecue. Didn't I say we were going to have a barbecue party in the afternoon? I ended up forgetting about the barbecue. As he spoke, Tony Stark got up and walked to the side, and after a while, he brought a large plate of lobster. I asked the chef to help make a little more hearty food, and in his opinion, that's what hearty food is. After finishing speaking, Tony looked at Suche. Dude, don't sit here, Kong is busy. Help me get it. There is still a lot of food down there. In addition, although you are also guests, please help me. You must know that we are the only ones in this villa. Hearing Tony Stark say that, although everyone was a little surprised. It's not in the flow of the party. And as the organizer of the party, don't you prepare everything, and then ask the guests to come and help. But although a little surprised, but everyone also got up. Follow Tony Stark to the villa courtyard. Just arrived at the courtyard, the whole villa and the courtyard were instantly dark in the next second. Then, a burst of birthday song music sounded. Originally, Fang Ping's plain ribbon on the courtyard. At this moment, colorful lights are also shining. And Tony Stark, who originally greeted everyone, but fell behind himself, came out pushing a big cake tower at this moment. Wow. I didn't expect that I would know. Today is your birthday, buddy. Pushing the cake in front of everyone, Tony Stark looked at Suche with a slightly smug smile and said, how about it, are you too touched? But don't cry, or I won't be responsible for coaxing you. Looking at the cake tower prepared by Tony Stark with great care. Steve turned his head and looked at Suche. Sue, today is your birthday. Sorry, I don't know, and I didn't prepare anything. Oh God, Mr. Superman, today is your birthday. Tony, you should have told us earlier, so that we can also prepare some birthday presents for Sue. Barton on the side also shook his head with a wry smile. In the personal conversation, only Susan Tosh's expression changed slightly. Why don't you talk anymore? Are you touched? Looking at Suche, Tony Stark clapped his hands, then opened his arms and said, how about it? Do you want to feel the warm embrace from a billionaire? Seeing Tony Stark with his arms outstretched, what else could Suche say? He stepped forward and gave Tony a hug, then returned to the cake. Looking at the cake tower with several layers, he said to Tony, seriously, Tony, I am really grateful for all of this. But actually today is not my birthday, but I accept your kindness and heartwarming gesture. Thank you very much. Look into Tony Stark's eyes. At this moment, Suche is very sincere in his thanks. For anyone's kindness, Suche is only grateful. Because in this world, the most expensive thing is always the kindness of others. Water? I heard Suche say that today is not his birthday. Tony Stark was stunned for a moment, and then he said to Suche puzzled, no, I checked your information, and the date shown in your detailed information is indeed today's birthday. Tony. Looking at Tony Stark's puzzled eyes. Natasha Romanoff explained softly with a smile. Any information about Sue that can be found on the internet is actually all fabricated by Nick Fury for him. The reason is that after Nick Fury knew that Sue was the Silver Moon Knight, in order not to let others know his identity, Nick Fury fabricated a detailed information about Sue. Listening to Natasha Romanoff's explanation, everyone suddenly realized and nodded. As for Tony Stark, he rolled his eyes and looked up. Damn Nick Fury, shame on me. How could be? Listening to Tony's words, Suche smiled and stepped forward to hug Tony Stark again. It's just that this time it was more forceful, making Tony constantly pat Suche on the back. Suche knew the reason why Wang Ni made such a move. It's all because he really regards himself as a true friend. Otherwise, judging from the fact that Tony can't remember Pepper's strawberry allergy. How can I remember that today is my birthday? I'm still very grateful, man, at least it didn't go in vain, did it? Pointing to the cake tower in front of him, Suche had a very happy expression. I can't remember how long I haven't eaten cake. While talking, Suche rolled up the sleeves of his shirt, then picked up a knife and fork and started cutting the cake. Then distributed the cut cakes to everyone. Since there is no barbecue, it is also very good to use cakes instead. I'll forget it. Smiling, he took Suche and handed over the cut cake, and Bo just tasted the cream on top. Then he said to Suche, Mr. Superman, maybe you won't have this trouble, but as a woman, I have to maintain my figure. Otherwise, I won't be able to find a boyfriend in the future. Looking for a boyfriend, Peepo. Anyway, This piece of cake is not bad. Listening to Peepo saying that it would be difficult to find a boyfriend if he became fat, Tony Stark immediately stepped forward, picked up a fork and dug a small piece of cake. It must be sent to Peepo's mouth very childishly. Seeing this scene, everyone suddenly laughed. Especially looking at Peepo, whose face was a little hot because of Tony's act of feeding himself. Natasha Romanoff held a small dish with cakes on it, and smiled at Suche. It seems that Tony likes his former assistant very much. Do you think he will confess his love today? I don't know, but you don't keep fit anymore? Watching that the cake she just handed over has been eaten by Natasha Romanoff. Then he dug another piece of cake with a thick layer of cream, Suche asked with a smile. Oh, no need. Looking at Suche with a little complacency, Natasha Romanoff smiled softly. Not to mention my daily training volume, my physical fitness alone is beyond the reach of ordinary people. Tony mistakenly thought that today was my birthday, so he specially prepared a big cake for the party. To be honest, it's really touching. But unfortunately, the information Tony checked was fake, forged by Nick Fury. However, I am still grateful for this, because the kindness of others is always the most precious. To be honest, even before I came to the parallel world, Wanda would help me prepare meticulously for my birthday every year. But the moment I saw the cake today, I suddenly felt that it was far from the last birthday that Wanda helped me prepare. It seems like a long time has passed. It's been so long that I even feel a little strange. It's been so long that it seems like centuries have passed. Actually, if you calculate the time I wandered from the destroyed universe to this parallel world is not very long. But I always feel that everything has not started from scratch. Especially watching my body recover to the age of 19, looking at this timeline that I have already experienced. Sometimes I even think that all the things in the past are just a dream I experienced. However, I don't want to wake up from that dream. At least, in that dream, I have Wanda, and I have the big family of Avengers Alliance. In the real world, I only have a house, no home. Asgard. Poor child. Looking at the latest updated diary, the feelings described above. Queen Frigg raised her hand and slightly stroked the words of the Warner Protoss on the diary. It seemed as if he was stroking the cheek of the owner of the diary lovingly. For Frigg, Su Di is a junior who has never met. Even if he came from another parallel universe. Even, the Thor of that universe was not born of this universe itself. However, Thor is still Thor, no matter which universe, Thor is still his own son. This relationship will not change just because the universe is changed. In the diary, this young man named Su Che has fought side by side with Thor countless times and lived and died together. So in Frigga's view, this young man named Su Che is equivalent to his own late. So, look at the mood written in Su Che's diary. Frigga felt a little emotional unconsciously. This is a junior who has a very similar mental journey to himself. Especially seeing the familiar words on the black gold diary. Frigga couldn't help thinking of the past. In fact, I have experienced this kind of inner transformation myself. I was once raised by a witch, in order to end the protracted war between the Vanir Protoss and the Acer Protoss. In the end, he chose to leave Vanaheim and marry his husband Odin. But turning around, the Acer Protoss led by Bor and Odin stopped the war. But cool, even if Kur was sealed in the end, the Vanir Protoss who was massacred could never go back. After so many years, I have already let go of these things. But this junior named Su Che is experiencing all this. Thinking of this, Queen Frigga sighed insignificantly. She knew that this change in her mental journey could only rely on this young man named Su herself. Mimir. I hope this young man who once lived and died with his own son in the parallel universe can find a moment of peace in his heart. Mimir, the once wise titan of the Vanir Protoss. Earth. Huh? So that Queen of Asgard, Frigg, actually likes this tone. Looking at the system panel, the trust value of Queen Frigga is soaring at this moment, even reaching 70%. Su Che was slightly surprised for a moment, and then understood. Recall that Wanda and Natasha Romanoff have a trust value of more than 1%. Su Che seems to have suddenly understood how to increase the trust value of the diary holder. Just like Wanda, want to get a large trust value? Better write more sweet little anecdotes about yourself and Wanda. At the same time, when in contact with Wanda in reality, he will show some special care to her. In this way, Wanda will absolutely trust and think that she is the most special one in my heart. After all, Wanda in this period was in her youth, when she was pregnant with Spring and yearning for that kind of sweet love. And brush Natasha Romanoff's trust value, except for some things that will happen in the future. It is also necessary to start with family and emotion. From the first time I met Natasha Romanoff in the coffee shop, if I remember correctly. Before Natasha Romanoff's trust value reached 90%, she used various things to test herself at least 3 times. But when her trust value reached more than 90%, she never tried it once. Even if I unintentionally showed it a little bit, it didn't conform to the personality recorded in the diary. Natasha Romanoff never suspected it. Instead, treat yourself as a trustworthy family member. As for Nick Fury, depend on. I won't talk about this product, since the last time it fell down and remained stable. Until now, Nick Fury's trust value is still at 73%. Sometimes Su Che really suspects that Nick Fury is a robot. Although he never trusts anything 100%. But, the trust value of this product is too strong. It's F*King F*K who can't be up or down. But this diary made Su Che discover how to increase the trust value of the Queen Frigg. Originally, today was the first gathering of the first-generation Avengers alliance. Although Thor and Dr. Banner are missing, but as a superhero of the parallel universe. At the time of the symbolic first assembly of the original Avengers alliance. There will definitely be a lot of emotion in the heart of the maintained character. So it has to be written down, whether it's Natasha Romanoff or Nick Fury. Everyone already thinks that the Black Gold Diary is the only channel for Su Che to express his inner depression, complexity, and other emotions. The original also wanted to use this diary to brush up Nick Fury's trust value. Unexpectedly, the trust value of Queen Frigga was increased by mistake. But think about it. Judging by the age of that Asgard Queen Frigg. Except about what's going to happen in the future for Thor and Loki. The one that can make her believe the most, or the one that can make her feel the most. In addition to the word love, there is no other channel. What hasn't she seen in all these years? In addition, she is not from the Earth, so she doesn't really care much about what will happen to the Earth in the future. Therefore, Su Che has now found a way to refresh Queen Frigg's trust value. No wonder before time travel, older people in my own world liked to watch some sorrow dramas that young people thought were embarrassing and unreasonable. The co-author Queen Frigg also likes this tune. Tisk Army. The Queen is also an elderly person. Shield. Nick Fury stays here after get off work. In fact, since the divorce, getting the house several times a month is too much. He's more used to being inside S.H.I.E.L.D. in this way, even if something happened to S.H.I.E.L.D. temporarily. Sitting in the Trident building by himself, he would be able to issue orders as soon as possible. But today is an exception. After all, today is the first time that the Avengers headed by Su Che have assembled. Nick Fury knows, as the Avengers of the parallel world, when revisiting the Avengers Alliance set again. Su Che will definitely update the diary again tonight. Sure enough, just as Nick Fury thought, the diary was really updated tonight. Flipping through the diary, Nick Fury wondered if he could see some of the updated diary. Regarding the Avengers Alliance that has not yet been formally established, what special attention should be paid to the first dispatch today? Avengers, the team proposed by Nick Fury doesn't seem to have this concept yet. The only people who know this name are me and Nick Fury from at the moment. However, the difference between the candidates for the first generation is not much. Compared with the parallel world I am in, the number of people assembled for the first time today is only missing Thor and Dr. Banner. Actually, today is an informal gathering before the establishment of the Avengers Alliance, but there are still many problems. Seeing this, Nick Fury's expression became serious. He really wanted to know what Su Che, a member of the old Avengers Alliance, would think about this. Today, when we took the Quinjet fighter to destroy the Hydra base in Sokovia, I actually seemed to be very calm during the whole process. But in my heart, there are already waves of surprises. I didn't expect that after the destruction of my world, I would meet them again and be able to fight side by side with them again. However, during the whole process, everyone is still very young. In general, more of them are fighting on their own. Natasha Romanoff and Barton cooperate very well. That's because they have already been partners, so they naturally know how to cooperate with each other. But they couldn't form a tacit cooperation with Tony and Steve. Especially at this stage, Natasha Romanoff and Barton still focus on the needs of S.H.I.E.L.D. This is not in the spirit of the Avengers Alliance. During the battle, Steve consciously cooperated with Tony and me, but it was far from reaching the tacit understanding of the team. Especially after holding Mjolnir's strength, more people choose to eliminate rather than overall situation. As for Tony, although the assigned duty is aerial reconnaissance, he will always support teammates who are at a disadvantage. But Tony still subconsciously chooses to believe in himself. This is not like a team at all. Even if I connect in the middle, it can reach the initial entry-level cooperation, but far inferior to the real Avengers Alliance team in my world. However, in fact, I know that this is quite normal. Comparing the Avengers Alliance in my world with the Avengers Alliance in this period is unfair to them. After all, in my world, we have experienced too much together, and a lot of tacit cooperation has been integrated into our habits. This is not fair to the members of the Avengers Alliance, which has not yet been formally established and is only assembled for the first time. Seeing this, Nick Fury nodded. He knew that the people who he hadn't given the title of Avengers Alliance yet. Because it is the first time to gather, there is no tacit understanding, and it is very normal for each to fight independently. A good team is always honed over time and various things. Rather than bringing together a group of powerful people, then they are the best and most excellent team. However, looking at Su Che's comparison, Nick Fury still has some expectations that the Avengers Alliance he has always wanted to form can meet Su Che's mouth. That kind of tacit understanding blends into the point of habit. Once you reach that point, maybe you won't need to provide too much help in the future. You only need to be responsible for the logistics support and a rear area where they can fight with peace of mind. And there is such a veteran Avengers Alliance superhero as Su Che. Nick Fury believes that the Avengers in his world will be more harmonious and stronger than the Avengers in his world. Su Che is Nick Fury's greatest confidence in the future development of the Avengers Alliance. Thinking of this, Nick Fury continued to watch. If I were to rate the small team assembled for the first time today, I would give it a full score of 10. Seeing this sentence, Nick Fury raised his eyebrows slightly. Just now it was said that the cooperation was not tacit, and they were still unfamiliar with each other. Even Natasha Romanoff and Barton only cared about SHIELD's orders and the like. As a result, the full score will be given directly when the score is scored now. But seeing the following sentence, Nick Fury instantly understood. In my world, the Avengers Alliance gathered for the first time to deal with the Chitauri who invaded the Earth. At that time, the members of the first-generation Avengers Alliance had just assembled. Not only did they not have a tacit understanding to fight each other, but there were also some frictions and gaps between them. Because Mr. Howard Stark used to mention his life and kept praising Steve in front of Tony for how excellent he is. Tony in this period was very unhappy with Steve, and the two quarreled and rubbed each other. Tony always called Steve old popsicle, old-fashioned, old man doing aerobics. And the good-tempered Steve couldn't understand Tony's arrogant attitude, and asked him what he did after he took off his armor. Dr. Banner does not participate in the friction between members, but is full of mistrust towards S.H.I.E.L.D. Thor laughed at a series of problems such as the fight between the Earthlings on the aerospace aircraft carrier. It can be said that when the members of the first-generation Avengers Alliance assembled at that time, there were many, many problems. If it wasn't for Chitauri's invasion of the Earth, if it wasn't for the Earth being in crisis of being attacked and occupied by aliens, then the friction of the first-generation Avengers Alliance will definitely increase, and the best result in the end will be an unhappy breakup. Look at the contents of the diary. Nick Fury recalled the tempers of the members of the original Avengers Alliance recorded in Su Che's diary. In other words, if there is no black gold diary, if I didn't respond in advance according to the future recorded in the black gold diary, or even changed a series of things, then maybe what I saw just now will be staged again. Even the thing about Steve and Tony Stark fighting each other. Nick Fury doesn't think there are any surprises at all. After all, who said Captain America Steve Rogers was a good guy? Don't be fooled by Steve's handsome, but melancholy and confused temperament. Steve has a temper too.